think my calendar and my routine has been sort of like my foundation in how I show up and how I get things done. But also one of the things that I learned earlier on is you have to do what's best in alignment with you and your nervous system. So something that I have been working on the last few years is my nervous system regulation, because as someone who didn't get a lot of sleep, would wake up early morning to train my clients, I was on the go. My mornings felt very like frazzled and my heart rate was really elevated, and I just felt, and then by mid-afternoon I was so tired and burnt out. So I knew that things had to be different for me. And so when I would read these books about really highly successful people, were usually written by men, because men, approach recovery and approach these systems a little bit differently than women do. But I would read these books and people were doing cold plunges like at 5 a.m, and then doing sauna and getting their mile run in, and then getting their workout and getting reading a chapter in a book, and then getting their green tea and like doing all the things. I'm like, oh wow, this feels very overwhelming for me. So I want to just preface this by saying, like, if you are struggling with your routine, it's first figuring out what works best for you and allows you to feel good, to regulate your nervous system. Because if you don't do that, I truly believe that if your nervous system is unregulated, you're going to have a hard time growing your revenue and also a hard time leading. Okay. So I just want to say that. And I think you're going to start hearing this a lot more, the nervous system. So I love slow mornings. So I actually don't have my first call, any sort of meeting, until around 9 a.m. So my first 2.5, 3 hours of the morning are no rushing, very slow, getting my stepson ready for school, making my coffee, eating my breakfast, looking at my calendar for the day and anything that I need to prep for. I post almost daily, so I'm looking at that time too. It's like my creative juices are flowing, and I love creating content. So that's when I'm, getting those ideas. I'm like, oh, I'm going to shoot this today. I'm going to shoot that today. Sometimes I may even like set up the camera and get a little B-roll. So my first half of the morning is very slow. From 9 until 5, and every day looks a little bit different. And so one of the things that I do love to do is that certain days are meant for certain activities. So like my Thursdays and Fridays, which is we have this interview now, are usually podcasts, because I host a podcast. So I have podcast interviews on those days, the only days people can book, and interviews like this, right? Where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm like deep in the business. So meetings, franchise meetings, corporate meetings, any type of meetings that I have with members are usually, I keep those Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays open for that. So yeah, I think it's super important, because also energy is important.
Yeah.
So
and knowing your natural flows, like if you work that front half of your week is where you are that most productive, spend that time in the business and save your other work for later in the week, right?
Absolutely. And that's where people, their energy starts to dip, is if they have 4 calls back to back, and then they got to go in and like teach some classes. That feels hard sometimes, so I think the way that you can kind of like batch out your schedule is do it around activities that you need, like morning, my creative time, which is why I have that slow morning. I know when I have my meetings, I know when I have my podcast interviews, and my family time, and I have really stuck strong to those boundaries of not taking calls past 5 p.m. Because what happens when we do that, we only end up resenting the person on the other end when we do that, and then we get mad at ourselves for doing that, so boundaries are going to be super important.